Hello dears, today we are going to speak about American fable, tall tale. It's also about American folklore. American fable, from English tall tale, a story in which the narrator himself as a rule does not believe. It is invented with the aim of not to fool the listener than to interest and amuse him. In the United States, such legends were often passed off as true to city dwellers, naive dilettantes as they were then called, in order to portray true pictures of life in the 19th century in Wild West. At that time, people did not distinguish between the real and fictional exploits of the heroes of the frontier. They formed an integral narrative which later became part of national folklore. Fiction as a folklore genre emerged in the early 19th century as a way for American settlers to accept the harsh life circumstances they had to face. The frontier zone where they ended up was covered with huge forests alternating with desert plains. Dangerous cliffs and cliffs met here and there. In addition, Indians still lived in those places, savages and barbarians, and the Americans believed. The purpose of the latter was to make the necessary territory suitable for the life of a large number of people, a difficult task and sometimes an extremely dangerous event. Therefore, often the heroes and heroines of American fiction stories were as big, strong, and merciless as their enemies. The settlers had to build huts, clear the soils for sowing, hunt wild animals, look for sources of fresh water. In other words, they needed to have truly superhuman strength and patience, almost superpowers. It was these circumstances that became the basis for the formation of a folklore character. Most of the fables told about the next adventure of one of the famous heroes, while some talked about exceptional cases. For example, about corn, which grew up to heaven in a matter of minutes. Jack and cornstalk, from English Jack and cornstalk. The purpose of such stories was, as a rule, to compose for the listener an attractive portrait of the distant western lands. One of the heroes of early American folklore was Davy Crockett. It is with his name that the first fables are associated, which became widespread in the United States in the 19th century. The future character in science fiction stories was a renowned hunter and successful politician, and after his death in 1836 at the Alamo, where he fought for the independence of Texas, Davy Crockett became a true legend. A series of books about his exploits and adventures, full of humor and frank inventions, appeared in print. Every time Davy Crockett dealt with the next valiants that he met on his ways, he hard worker living in the wilderness identified himself with this hero and felt the strength to fight his own enemies, the impossible American thickets. It is not known who was the author of these first fables, but then they quickly became popular and still continue to pique the interest of readers. Another fact about the folk tales about the Wild West and the conjectures of writers. According to legend, he was born in Texas in the 30s of the 19th century as an infant, fell out of his parents' van and was lost in Pecos River Valley, where he was picked up and raised by coyotes. Bill was the embodiment of a brave and strong man, a fearless cowboy. It was he who invented the lasso, easily tamed a grizzly bear, and saddled a thundercloud for everyone marvels. Mike Fink and John Henry and many others are also the heroes of American fable. Some of them are the fruit of folk fantasy, while others had a real prototype. But they have one thing in common. All these characters are outstanding and strong-willed people. Fiction stories are the very essence of American character. 2 centuries ago, vast unconquered lands inspired fictional storytellers. Today, these tales continue to inspire a sense of admiration for American nature and the all-powerful settlers who managed to conquer it. Passing these legends from generation to generation, Americans instill in their children a sense of pride in their country and people who did not spare themselves for its formation, and with this and the desire to imitate them, to be strong and hardworking. However, the indigenous population of America, the Indians, also participated in the creation of Latin American cultures. Therefore, the cultures of modern Latin American republics, having many common features, are distinguished by their unequal originality, which they owe to the Indians, and in Brazil and the West Indies, also the Negroes. The development of national cultures began in the first half of the 19th century, after the liberation of the peoples of Latin America from colonial oppression and the formation of independent republics. This expands by various sciences disagree in assessing the population of America, or that are recording a different opinion. The Indians were from 20 and 40 million people. Basically, the population of Latin America at the time of the appearance of Columbus could be divided into 2 groups, into primitive tribes of wandering hunters, gatherers and farmers, and into people who created high civilization and which developed or formed states. Legends and tales of South American Indians were recorded by researchers mainly in 19th and 20th centuries. These tales reflect nature, occupation, beliefs for the Indians, whose main occupation, or as already mentioned, was hunting and primitive agriculture. The world was full of spirits. That is, that any species of animals is the ancestor of such a group of people. In most of the most ancient tales, man is not yet separated from the world around him. It is not surprising, therefore, that the vast majority of American Indian tales are animals' tales, and many of them are mythological in nature. These include tales of the origin of animals. In the tale of Fuegians, it is about the flood people filling of rock turning to seals and seabirds. In the Cajun's tale, the flood and the creation of rivers and beasts, 2 shamans of different tribes sculpt animals from the ashes and coals of an extinct fire. Thank you for your attention. See you the next time.